Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, and today we're going to be talking about screenwriting over 50. Now, this may sound strange to you, or maybe you've already thought about this, but I would have different strategies if I were coming in at age 25 versus at age 50. And the reason why is really two things. One is because at age 25, you're going to walk into this industry, you'll be right in the middle of where most people are starting age-wise. And it's really easy for them to hire somebody or start working with somebody at that age. The second reason is on the other side, you and I have less time. We do. We have less time than others. And so this is something that, if you're going to spend effort on, and especially if what you're hoping to do is to be able to create some kind of success in the next 5 to 10 years, you need different strategies. Now, let me just take you over here, and I want to tell you a story real quickly. Because over the last 20 years, have had a chance to work with hundreds of writers who have made deals. Many of them are in their 50s. And I want to tell you where this came from. Because it didn't come from the normal path that I think people go down. It came from a little different one. I was a guy in Austin, Texas, back in early 2000. I decided I wanted to do screenwriting. And a friend of mine and I had worked together. He had started screenwriting before me. About that time, he moved to Los Angeles. Now, I had written 4 or 5 screenplays at that point, and I was contemplating the possibility of moving to LA, but he moved there. And he started telling me stories. We would talk once or twice a week on the phone, and he was telling me stories about all the things that he had done. He had read all the books. When he got there, he didn't have a job, so he just started reading all the screenwriting books. And then he joined a writer's group, and then he joined a second writer's group, and he was flying. So 3 months later, I came out, and up until that point, I'd been working in corporate training. I'd been designing training programs for about 100 corporations. So I was in the middle of flying around. I met with him, and he walked me through his strategy. And I listened, and I was like blown away. Wow, this guy's got it figured out. His strategy basically came down to this. He was going to stay in LA for 10 years. And during that 10 years, he was going to network, and he was only going to write movies that could be done for $100 million. He said, LA is where the studios are. The studios are looking for great $100 million movies. That was what he was going to do. So I was enamored. I completely bought into it, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. I went back home, wrote a script that could be done for $100 million. I was lucky. It was a high concept. So I started pitching it, and we were used to pitching. I'd done a lot of pitching to major corporations. So I started pitching it and got the script into 24 companies. So I flew in, met with my friend, told him about this, and he was like, wow, that's really great. Amazing. He didn't tell me anything about what was happening with him. But I went around and met with some of those companies, and they turned the script down, every single one of them. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? This is based on all the classes I had taken, and I'd taken a bunch of them. Based on all the classes I had taken, this is a pretty good script, right? So I got my wife on the phone. She's the person who usually sets up our meetings, and asked her to get me some interviews with producers. Now, the reason I did this was because the producers that I'd gotten the script into weren't really open to talking about it. So I came back to town. I spent 2 weeks here. I did 25 interviews during that 2 weeks. And by the end of that 2 weeks, I realized a lot of the things I had been told about what causes a producer to say yes were absolutely wrong. And I also realized most of the people who were teaching screenwriting didn't know how to make a deal. They didn't know how to put business together. And I kept asking them, but they didn't have that understanding. Now, we were working with 100 corporations, and every one of them, we had put an original deal together and started that. So we knew how to do this. So I went back to my friend. We had lunch together. It was just before I was going to fly out. And I said, listen, uh, I don't think it's the way we think it is. I think there's a whole different set of strategies you got to use here. He told me that I had been misled and sent me back to Austin, Texas. 3 months after that, we had a potential deal going on. So I moved to LA at that point, and started doing more interviews with producers. Every interview I did gave me more insights. That's what this is right here. They gave me more insights, more breakthroughs, more understanding. And after about, another 30 interviews, I went back and met with my friend, who had just written, I think his seventh or eighth script. He still hadn't yet made any kind of deal. And in fact, he had done only maybe 2 meetings at that point. But he was convinced his networking was going to make it happen. So I told him what I had learned from talking with all these producers. He got very angry at me and basically stopped talking with me. Now, I just moved there and he was my only friend. So that was a little sad, a little upsetting. Uh, I tried to set up some meetings with him and some lunches. He always had a reason to say no. About 2 years later, we made our first real deal, and then another one. And in the midst of all of that, I had done a lot more interviews. I'd started interviewing A-list screenwriters and those kinds of things because I wanted to know how they thought, what they did, what worked, what didn't work. I ran into him at one point at a conference and said, hey, I'd love to get together with you and let's talk about stuff and share what I learned and what you learned and all of that. And he says, yeah, he says, I'll send you an invitation. Now, nothing, didn't hear a thing. About 5 years later, I get that invitation, and he's having an event that is his going away party. At this point, it had been almost 10 years. And when I showed up at the event, there were about 20 other people there. And he told us this story of how he had come here and thought he was going to make it happen. He had a great plan. Nothing seemed to work, and he blamed it all on ageism. He said he had given it 10 years and that was all, and he was going back home. Now, let me pause for a second. First, that was upsetting. That was sad to watch. But second, I had already been through enough stuff to know his problem wasn't ageism. His problem was his strategies. I was okay with his goal. His job, he wanted to sell something. He wanted to make something happen. He wanted to make a splash. I was good with that, but his strategies and his understanding of the industry absolutely kept him out. So I sat down at that point and I took a whole weekend and I made a list of everything that I would have told him, everything that I thought would help him move forward. And in the midst of it, I started putting on some classes, and that started actually Screenwriting U. And those classes were all about how do you break into this industry? Most screenwriting teachers don't want to talk about that. And back then, there were actually screenwriting teachers that lectured me and told me I shouldn't talk about how do you sell a script or how do you break into the industry, those kinds of things. They said writers should only be talked with about writing. Uh, and that's up to them. They can do whatever they want. But what our results out of this has been this. With the strategies just that I told him, I have taught those to thousands of writers. We've had over 600 writers make their first deal. So I'm telling you this because in the meantime, we've interviewed, I think I've interviewed about 700 producers now, plus or minus. I've interviewed 100 and some odd A-list screenwriters. I've interviewed 150 agents and managers, looking for exactly what it takes. We've been through deals of our own. We've also walked writers through their deals. And so we've had a chance to see this from pretty much all the sides that were necessary. And what I'd like to do today is to present to you the strategies that I believe it takes for somebody over 50 to be able to make their first deals, to be able to have the successes they want, and to be able to achieve the goals that they have, and turn it into something that they've always wanted to do. So first thing, I want you to know up front, if you're over 50, and especially if you're over 60, the vision isn't 10 years, it's success in 5 years. And this is absolutely possible if you do the right things. If you do what everybody else is doing out there, I don't think you have a chance. Right? It's like there are certain things that work in this industry. There are certain things that get you indoors, that there are certain ways to pitch that are absolutely successful. And I'll just give you one quick example. When I first came here, I took a class where they taught me to do a 5-minute long pitch. And that 5-minute long pitch, then we did it with 40 producers. Nobody in the class got script request. And I stood back and I went, something's wrong here. So as one of the producers was walking out, I said, hi, my name is Hal Krosman. I've interviewed a lot of producers. I was wondering if I could just ask you 2 questions. And he said, sure, go ahead. I said, first, you just listened to 40 pitches. What didn't work? And he goes, almost anything. He says, they told me a long story, every one of them, including you. They told me this long story and never actually got to what mattered to me. And I was like, okay, that brings me to the second question. What would you have liked to have happened in that room? And he goes, I would have liked to have sat down with each person, had them immediately tell me the things I need to know to make a decision, and then let me ask them questions. So I got in the elevator with him and I said, what things do you need to know? Give me a pitch. I'd love to hear one of your pitches. By the time I was done with that elevator ride, which lasted maybe 6 floors, I never, ever in my life have pitched the way that guy taught us to pitch. Now, I'm just telling you this because there are so many things that are out there that are exactly opposite of what you need. So today, what I'd like to do is this. I'll walk you through, excuse my voice here. I'll walk you through these 3 things. First, what gives you power? Because you need to know that. Sitting in that room where I was doing those pitches to those 40 producers, if I would have just known what I learned on that elevator ride, it would have changed everything. I would have pitched every one of them in a very, very different way. I would have focused on what gave me power instead of trying to tell this big, long story that kept me from selling. So be careful when you hear stuff like that. If somebody tells you, hey, you got 5 minutes, so talk for 4 minutes and then open it up for questions, just immediately know they don't understand pitching in this industry. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Second, I'm going to give you 6 strategies to sell because you need to know that. If you're if what you're hoping to do is to have movies made, before you spend much more time working on how to write, figure out how to sell your project. Because once you understand this, then it will influence the choices you make, and it'll definitely cause you to create different kinds of pitches. That's important. And then we'll talk about the upcoming class, Writing Incredible Movies, for those of you who first want to write incredible movies, and second, actually want to succeed in this industry. This is a class that we designed 2 years ago. So coming out of the pandemic, I stood back and I went, all right, we've learned a lot of things. Some things have changed in the industry. And we just put together a class that I put together a development team, and we worked our asses off on this and put together a class to give you everything you need to be able to make something happen. By the end of this particular class, you will come into this world, into this industry, saying things that make sense to them, that make you attractive, that make it easy for them to request your script and to want to work with you. So that's the whole purpose. Okay. First, what gives you power? In just a moment here. Pardon my voice. I ate a bunch of ice cream last night, and it's not a good choice for me because I'm actually allergic to it. So, what gives you power? You got to know this. First, knowing what's attractive to producers. My friend that I was talking about, he had no idea what was attractive to producers. He knew what was attractive to him. And he was hoping that they thought the same way as he did. There's a huge difference between writers and producers. Writers, like me as a writer, my journey begins the moment I come up with an idea, and it goes to the point at which I've completed it and finished writing it and am pitching it. The producer's journey starts when they hear my pitch, and they go all the way to the point that they have sold it, funded it, and produced it, right? Our journey is a writing journey. Theirs is a business journey. They are radically different journeys. So once you know that, you won't sit and tell them a big, long story like I was told to do way back then. Instead, you'll go, wait a minute, what matters to them? What do they need to know? Right? Essentially, I'm going to take you on that elevator ride that I took that changed my whole life from a perspective of pitching. What else gives you power? Focusing on your strengths, right? There are certain things that you are really good at, and it's different for different people. For some people, what they're really great at is creating characters and creating interesting and unique and, amazing characters that we can't stop thinking about. For other people, it's structure or plot, or writing dialogue or whatever it is. You wanna focus on and also learn the things that you don't know, but on your strengths, you want to take the things you're best at and get twice as good at them. So while you're learning all the other stuff, don't ignore your strengths. These are the things that later on people are going to say you're a genius over. So take, and this is real advice. Take whatever you're best at. Make a list of all the different skills that you have. Take whatever you're best at and double the quality of that. Don't just go, oh, I'm already good enough. Even if you're the best ever, anybody you're the best at this in the world, double the quality of it so that it stands out as genius instead of just, oh, well, this person's really good at this. It makes a huge difference in this industry. So third, go to accessible markets. My friend and I were going only to studios. Studios were hard to get in. We were good at it because we had already worked with major corporations, and I was used to interacting with people at the very top of those companies. So we had no fear of talking with producers or studios or any of those kinds of things. We also knew how to get in those doors because, again, we had done it over and over and over with 100 some odd major corporations. So that was accessible to us. But my friend actually couldn't get in the door. And he wouldn't talk with me about how to do it because he didn't want to not know something, or it was a status thing. So the question is, what markets are accessible to you? For some of you, there may be a few that studios are accessible. You can get in those doors. There may be a few others that the mid-level markets, as in medium-level producers who have access to studios, but also have access to other funding sources and those kinds of things you might be able to get to. If you have never entered this industry, then accessible markets are the small producers who can get a movie made. And those people, by the way, answer their own phones. They don't have any gatekeepers in between them. They will listen to pitches in a much easier way. If you want to go to them, you can go to them through a whole bunch of different forms. You can send emails, you can make phone calls, you can meet them at events. There's all kinds of things you can do. There's about 15 different strategies to get in those doors. But here's the thing. If you can get into, let's say we're here and we say this is the lower level, and then here's the middle and here's the top. If you can get into the lower level and get something made, small, indie movie, that gets you enough credibility to get to the middle level, because then you can say you're a produced screenwriter, and now you can talk to those mid-level producers. And if you make a deal with one of them, you can get to the bigger producers. So there are many strategies that can succeed for you. It's just most people don't want to talk about the real ways people make things happen. And let me just say this. I've interviewed about 100, a little over 100 some odd A-list screenwriters. And one of the things I did was I asked them about their path coming in. 80% of them made deals at the smaller level first in order to get in the doors at the bigger level next. One of the guys that I interviewed that was A-list said he had actually had 4 small movies made before he ever even talked with a studio. And it wasn't until he had the 4th one made that he had the confidence to finally go and, start knocking on those doors at the studio level. But the truth is he was coming in now with credibility. He had worked with 4 producers. He had had 4 movies produced. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't afraid of trying new things or listening to notes or any of those kinds of things. So this is incredibly valuable. And then become a great writer. And this doesn't mean a good writer. This means a great writer. This means really 2 things. This means that you can write at a level that wins contests, and that you write in a way that works for the industry. So when somebody tells you they're a great writer because they love their own writing, but they can't pitch their script, they're not yet a great writer, right? Part of writing a script is making sure it's pitchable, and it is really important. You wouldn't believe how many people will write scripts and never think about the pitch until after the script is done. And now they have to figure out some kind of way to make it interesting to a producer. And then that causes them to have to go back and rewrite the script because they had to change the pitch and take it to a different level. We write our pitches first. And I learned that from an A-list screenwriter. I was talking with a guy named Mark Roseman, who had He had actually had 8 out of 9 of his scripts produced. Uh, and I was doing interviews in front of about 120 people or so. And Mark comes in, I'd never met him before. And I said, this is an advanced group of writers. They've all been through our master classes. They all have interacted with producers and managers. What do you think you could bring to the table that would make a difference for them? And he goes, well, 8 out of 9 of my scripts have been produced. Maybe I can share my strategies. And I said, absolutely. Let's talk about that. And here basically was his main strategy. His main strategy, remember, 8 out of 9 scripts weren't optioned. They were produced, and they were in the $15 to $45 million range. His main strategy was he created the pitch first. And he said he would create 4 or 5 pitches before settling on one and going, okay, I can sell this one. Then he wrote an outline out of that. And based on the outline, he decided if he wanted to write the script. But he already knew he could sell it before he ever started. That's part of being a great writer. And you can do this. You absolutely can do this. So, but we'll talk about this. And that's, by the way, that's part of the course that we're going to talk about also, in case that's something you're interested in. You do all of these things, and it doesn't matter how old you are. And that's where, again, if I look back at my friend David, he never understood any of these things, not one of them. He blamed it all on ageism, but the truth of the matter was the problem wasn't ageism, it was his strategies. He was using strategies from a decade before that the whole industry had already started changing, and it's changed quite a bit since then. So change your strategies and you change the level of success that you have. So what do you need to succeed? Because it's important to really think about this. So by the way, if you have the handout, fill in all these blanks. It will help you immensely when later on, when you come back to review your notes. But first, let's just go through this one step at a time. I'm going to give you the main things, and then I'll give you the 7 strategies. To succeed, first you need to become a power writer and a power learner. There's a lot of people out there who say, write every day and you'll be successful. But I know hundreds of writers who write every day, and they haven't improved in years. But they keep writing every single day. They're writing their next script, and then they're writing the script after that. They left out this part, learning. In fact, we have one lady that wrote a script. Cheryl and I, at the time, were producing. She came to us and she said, "This is my 20th script." And I was like, "Oh, wow, it must be amazing." She gave it to us. I started reading, and I was about 10 pages in, and I went, "This needs a rewrite." So I went back to her and said, do you have any other scripts that you think are highly marketable? And she did, her 3rd script. So I read her 3rd script. Her 3rd script and her 20th script were the same level of quality. She had not improved one bit from 3 to 20. So she was a power writer. She was writing like crazy, but she wasn't learning at all. You got to keep learning. This industry is moving quickly. You can't stand there and say what I knew 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago was good enough. So my advice is this: write every day, write a scene or something, even if it's half a scene. Create something new every day. This is a different kind of process than just writing. This means you're going to create a character, you're going to create a scene, you're going to create some structure, you're going to create something that you're coming from nothing. Create something every day, even if it's something small. You need to keep that part of your creativity going. And by the way, again, these two are completely different. if you're writing and and it's like, okay, you write a draft and then you wordsmith it or something like that, you're working with what's on the page. If you're creating, you're coming from nothing. Because of that, you have to think and create in a different way. This, by the way, also will keep you young. This will keep your mind, your mind will be sharp as can be. And then the third thing is learn something new every day. I've done all those interviews I told you about. I have done, I've written a lot of scripts, but I've also worked with hundreds of writers. I have 3 development teams we're working on right now on new classes that we're creating. I'm learning something every single day. Every day I learn something new. And it's absolutely possible to do that, especially nowadays in this industry, with all the new things that are happening. So you do these 3 every day, that means you're going to get better and better and better and better. You'll improve your writing, you'll improve your ability to create, and you will learn so much more. And that gives you an advantage. Number 2, what you need to succeed. Focus on what truly makes you special, unique, and marketable. Now, let me just go to this last one. This is pretty important. Marketable means you have a project that you can easily pitch in about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And the moment you pitch it, it shows up as something unique, something we haven't seen. If you're creating an action story, it takes us to a place of action we haven't been to yet, or a character that is so unique, so different in the action world and surprises us in ways, right? So it's unique. This is marketable again. It's unique. It can be said in a single sentence or in 2 sentences, and it's an instant hook. The moment you say it, it lights people up. That's what we're talking about for marketable. What the producers need in this industry and the studios are things that they can get audiences excited about, and they can do it in a 30-second TV spot. So that's what you're thinking. Back to the guy in the elevator. That's what one of the things he told me. He says, listen, people are telling me this whole story and I still don't know what the genre is. He says, they're not giving me what I need to know things. And by the way, genre is one of like 5 things you need to be able to give them instantly in that 30 seconds. But you can do it. It's easy. We'll talk about it as we go through this. It's just about focus. What are you focusing on? Don't tell stories that have already been told. Don't tell stories that are, little stories that don't matter. Especially don't tell stories that don't match what the industry needs. Find out what will make a difference, what will get them to say yes to you, and create projects around that. And by the way, let's just say this so it's clear. A lot of books are made into movies. But if you go look, you'll see it's about 0.1% of the books that are out there have been made into movies. They're usually either books that are runaway bestsellers, New York Times bestseller, huge success, known name, all that kind of thing. Or they're books that are so unique. There's some kind of major thing there that makes them something that hooks an audience, and it just lights the country on fire and everybody's reading it. Those are the ones that succeed. There's the other 99.9% basically are not pitchable. Most people have written books that are good books that will serve their market, that work well in that industry, that just don't work well in this industry. Or what you got to do is find a way to pitch it, and then write a script that focuses just on that one thing. We had one person who His book, just he couldn't get anybody to say yes to it. But two producers told him they loved one chapter. So he took that one chapter and he wrote an entire screenplay, the entire story, start to finish, used the book as the intellectual property that it was based on, and sold the script based on just one chapter because it was the most interesting thing in that book. And he turned it in, he recognized it, he realized that only that chapter was marketable. The rest of the book wasn't. Uh, and it made the difference for him. So there are lots of ways to do this. You just need to know what you're doing. Number three, be smart about your strategies, not set in your ways. My friend coming in the door, he had already made a decision before he got to LA. He knew how he was going to sell it. He knew what he was going to do. He absolutely believed that he was going to be able to take this town by storm. And it turned out all the strategies that he had, the plans that he had, when he got to this town, he should have stood back and said, wait a minute, what doesn't make sense in this environment? So he was set in his ways. He never changed his plan. No matter, and I had two arguments with him, where I was just presenting some ideas, and he got into the argument with me. He got really upset with me that I was presenting something outside the box of what he was planning to do. He was totally set in his ways. He spent 10 years here that was basically wasted because he just wouldn't think about other strategies. When it comes to this, just know this. You have a vision, this whole thing you're going towards, it's up there. And whatever it is totally fine. Now, what are the set of strategies that can get you there? And sometimes depending upon what your vision is, you may need to change those strategies 2 or 3 or 4 times. Back to that elevator ride, coming out of that elevator ride, I changed my strategies. And it made all the difference, by the way. I have used what that guy told me in that elevator. I have used in 400 pitches. We have gotten so many scripts requested because of that. We've gotten in doors we could have never gotten in just because I changed my strategies because somebody who knew told me about it and I learned from them. I'm still, by the way, kind of sad about my friend. He wouldn't consider things. Oh well, too bad. Let's go. Now let's go to the strategies. First strategy. Think movies, not lottery tickets. This is important. So I want to tell you the difference between my friend and an A-list screenwriter that I interviewed. And it's the guy I was talking about who had 4 low-budget indie movies. His name was Alan Loeb. Alan Loeb, one of the movies he did was Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps. He's had a whole bunch of other movies, and then he started producing. But Alan did the opposite of my friend. So my friend was all about the big deal. He was only going to go for $100 million deal or above. He wanted something that was going to make the news and tell everybody back in Texas that he was wrong or that they were wrong about him, and all of that kind of thing. Alan Loeb, the A-list screenwriter, said, I went into this and I thought, what I want to do is I want to be the best I can be, but in order to do that, I got to make some movies. And so he started making small movies, low indie movies. And he wasn't producing them. He wasn't directing them. He wasn't doing any of that. He'd found some indie producers who had small budgets and said, hey, I have some scripts. And he rewrote one script completely to make it as low budget as possible so that this producer could do it for about $80,000. That was his first movie. And they got it made. He said nothing happened with it, but at that point, he now was a produced screenwriter. So because of that, he now could make the next level happen. So his next movie was like 200,000, excuse me, 200,000. And then it went up from there. But by the time he got to the fourth movie, he had enough confidence to go to the studio, and that changed everything. So let's just see what this says here. The objective: take the path that makes deals and gets movies made. Your life changes when you have a movie made, and it changes in a bunch of ways. First, you're no longer just a writer. You're somebody who has actually had something produced. Second, you've now worked with a producer throughout the project, and you at least understand a little bit of what needs to be done and how to prepare a script to be made into a movie, right? How to prepare it for production. That makes a difference. Third, then when you talk to any other producer from this point on, you will have confidence because you know how they think. You know what's going on. You've worked with them throughout the project, right? And you'll also have confidence when they start asking, is this script ready to be produced, and what needs to be changed in it, and things like that. You'll have been through it, so you will be able to do that, right? And that makes a difference, a big difference. So studios, and this is why we're saying don't go for the lottery tickets. Studios are the most difficult market that there is. They already have all of their A-list screenwriters. They're not looking for anybody new. You can still get in those doors. You can still make something happen, but a lot of times you have to have a lot of credibility, or you have to have a producer standing next to you. So again, you go to small producers, you get movies made, and that gives you the credibility and that gives you the experience. It also is a big step on making your dream happen. So you're not just kind of writing in the corner of your room and always wondering if you can do it. This gives you, just working with a small producer gives you so much in the way of understanding and preparing your next projects. And by the way, for anybody who thinks, low budget movies is a bad thing, it takes more creativity to write a great low budget movie, because you're not able to go, okay, we'll take this scene and let's have, $500,000 of pyrotechnics go off, right? You're not able to do that. So because you can't set this in 20 different European locations, and you can't create something where you're going to have explosions all the way through and all that kind of stuff, you've got to figure out how to make it more interesting just because of the writing, just because of the drama, just because of the dialogue, just because of who the characters are and what the conflict is, right? So it takes more creativity. That's my opinion. But it's 20 times easier to get a low budget movie made than a high budget. I'm going to base that on this. 2 years ago, we were looking at the statistics. There were 30 high budget movies made, movies over 50 million, 30 that year. There were 600 low budget movies that were produced and made it to, Netflix or those kinds of things, streamers. 600. So there were 20 times more low budget movies made than high budget movies. That's why I'm saying it's so much easier. It's absolutely possible if you just write the right kind of stuff and, create a pitch beforehand and take it to small producers who answer their own phones and read their own emails and all of that kind of thing. And they're accessible. Okay. Strategy 2, write for the money audience. Now, this, let me say it this way. I had a friend who just turned 70. And he is writing a script where all the lead characters are 70 or older. And I was like, that's going to be kind of hard. That's going to be kind of hard to get a producer to say yes to. And he's like, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to write it. So I said, okay, if you're just writing it for you, absolutely go ahead. I do it. See what you come up with. I can't wait to hear about it. But in general, he's not considering the audiences. So let me just kind of walk you through this. Producers need movies that will draw an audience. This is what everything is about in this industry. If you're talking TV series, it's the same thing. If you're talking going to the streamers with projects, they still need it to draw an audience, right? Studios, that's all they think about. So you want to be at least considering this. So here's what this looks like. Here's the different audiences. And let me just walk you through them from the bottom up. Oh, I'm going to go from the top down. 35% of people who come to movies are 18 to 39 years old. Now, there's another big population that is below 18, but I'm just going to start at 18 and we'll move forward here. 18 to 39. So if you're thinking, hey, I need to be able to reach this audience, which is 35%, you need at least one lead character that's in that neighborhood, 18 to 39. Then 13% are 40 to 49, 12% are 50 to 59, and 17% are 60 plus. This number, by the way, was 12% if we back up 5 years. So we're getting more and more people are hitting their 60s, right? This is going to become a more and more viable market. Just something to consider. But if you're going to do it, what I would be doing is having somebody in their 60s and then having somebody else in this range. And that way, and possibly a 3 generation, 60, 40, 20, and hit all three on that. But if you're looking at, who is this movie for? If you say 60 plus right now, there's only 17% of the population that shows up to movies for that. And that's pretty tight. That makes it very difficult if it's just 60 plus. So keep that in mind. A lot of times what we try to do is we try to write movies that fit both of these. So you end up with like 48 to 50% of the market if you have like a parent who's in their 40s and their kid who's in their 20s. That gives you 50% of the market. So just be thinking about that. And by the way, this is something to know when you start talking to producers, because a lot of times they'll ask you, who is the audience? And it's just really easy. You just start looking at these age groups and consider male versus female. Is this a story that's primarily a women's movie, or is it primarily a men's movie? If it's primarily a women's movie, then that means, yes, you're going to have characters in whatever these age groups are, and they're mainly going to be women, and we're going to be dealing with women's issues and what's important to them. Same thing if it's mainly a man's movie. If it's, let's say you have an action story that almost is entirely focused on men, you're looking at males in whatever age ranges you're talking about. So just be thinking about that. And that's right. That's how you pitch it, by the way. You say, this movie primarily focuses on women, in their 40s who have daughters in their 20s, right? And it's like, okay, that's that side of the coin. Or you might say, you know what, this movie is mainly focused on people who are in their 50s and 60s, both male and female, who are going through major concerns about retirement and their life changing and who are they going to be and what is it about? And that ends up being 19% or 29% of the market. So there you are. Now, strategy 3, become very flexible in your writing. very flexible in your writing. The same story can be written a lot of different ways. So the more you can do it, the more professional you are. Now, this becomes really important once you start interacting with producers, because if a producer asks you to make some changes, the reason they're asking you to do that is because it helps get the movie made. This is one of the things that I found when I stepped out of the writer's world into the producer's world and then stepped back. There's a lot of writers who say, if a producer's asking you to make changes, don't do it. Let me just let you know if you do that, that's a big, big stop sign for the producer. Because when they are trying to get things ready for production, the easiest place to make changes is in the script, right? If all of a sudden they go, wow, we were going to do this movie for 5 million and now we only have 2 million. What they do is they go back to and look at the script first and say, okay, are there any scenes in here that take special effects? Are there any scenes in here that require a lot of locations? Are there scenes that could be changed? Can we reduce page count a little bit? And what they're doing is they're trying to make their budget so they can make your movie. So when that happens, that's a time when you need to be flexible. And if you are, you know what? You stay on the project. And that's the big thing for you to know. We had 2 writers that didn't want to change a word. They had listened to all those angry people out there that told them, don't let a producer change anything. And one of them called me up and she said, I have a problem with my producer. He wants to make some changes to the script and I'm just not going to do it. So how do I convince him to do it exactly the way it is? And I said, how long has this problem been going on? And she said, about 3 months. And I'm like, oh no, you're in trouble. And anyway, about a week later, she got replaced. They brought in a new writer. They hired the writer to rewrite her script the way they wanted. That writer, in order to get a credit, had to change the script by 50%. She butchered that screenplay. My writer came back to me and said, first she was horrified. And I said, there's nothing you can do. You made the mistake. Don't do it. It's too late. And so then she came back to me 6 months later and she said, she found out that the producer is thinking about shelving the script because the other writer didn't do a good job. And I said, okay, we got a window here. What I'd like you to do is take all the notes that producer gave you and go through and take a draft of your script and do a rewrite with your words that honors what the producer needs. And she goes, and then what? And I said, and then you're going to give it to the producer and say, hey, I thought about these things. I think this might be able to help you get the movie made. So she did that. They fired the other writer, hired her back, and her movie got made. But she finally had to become flexible, and it would have been just really nice if she didn't have to go through all that pain. So let's talk about this. The more ways you can write a scene, the more creative you're writing. There's a lot of times when people get stuck in it, and I've been in there, where you write a scene and then you edit it and you poured your heart into it and it feels right. And then somebody asks you to change it and it's like, no, I'm not changing that. But listen, if you're going to be a pro, you can write that scene 10 different ways. You could actually write it 20 or 30 different ways if you're going to be a pro. So part of becoming a pro is building this flexibility so that you can write or rewrite things and make them even better than you thought they could be. That's important. Value number 2, you'll be significantly more competent when working with producers. The worst thing you can do when a producer asks you to make changes is go, no, that won't work. It'll never work. There's nothing you can do. You can't change that. But the reason people do that is because they're just not competent enough yet. they haven't yet recognized and elevated their skill level to a level that they can write anything, right? So the more competent you are, again, the more ways you write a scene, the more competent you are. You should be able to look at a scene and rethink it in so many different ways. And it should be pretty easy. You should be able to do that with a character also, with an ending, with an opening of your script, right? This is incredibly important, and it makes you more valuable in this industry. Value number three, you'll have producers who want to work with you again and again and again and again. Uh, I have, well, let's see, we have writers that have done up to, one writer's done 25 deals. He's had like 7 movies produced out of it. And he's basically done that with about 6 different producers. So 25 deals, it's an average of 4 per producer, but I know one of them, he actually wrote 7 scripts for that producer that he got paid for every one of them. And that's because the producer saw that he had both of these. He was able to write anything, any way. He was incredibly competent in working with producers, and they just want to work with him. And that guy, as long as those producers are in business, they'll be working with him. So it's important to know. It is a worthwhile thing. So strategy number 4 now, give yourself an easy entrance. This is so important. We go back to my friend. He made it incredibly difficult for anybody to hire him, for him ever to get in that door. So give yourself an easy entrance. First thing, become a great writer. And you can do that. You can do that inside of 6 months if you just do the right stuff. Become a great writer. This is what they're looking for. They're not looking for good writers. They're not looking for average writers. They're looking for great writers. If you become a great writer, then even if a producer just reads 5 pages of your script, they're going to go, oh my God. We had a writer named Delia Colvin, and she went through this program, by the way. This is where she started. But she became a great writer. And at one point, she had gotten a script into a producer and he had not read it. It had been a month. She called him after a month and he said, I don't know if I have time for this. And he was basically going to just cancel it. And she said, I'll tell you what. She goes, you've taken the time to request the script. You may not remember the pitch. I'll give it to you in just a moment. But I'll make you this deal. If you'll just read the first scene, which is 3 pages long, I will leave you alone from now on. And he was like, okay, I'll make that deal. He says, I'll read your 3 pages right now. And he pulled it up on the computer and they said goodbye. 5 minutes later, he called her back and he went, oh my God, you're an incredible writer. He had only read 1 scene. And he was like, oh my God. He says, you're an amazing writer. I couldn't believe that first scene. He says, I'll call you back tomorrow and we'll talk about how we're going to work together. He ended up optioning the script, moving it forward. All kinds of things happened out of that for her. He actually recommended her to about 6 other producers. She got work and ended up doing things because of that 1 scene that showed she was a great writer. This is absolutely possible for you guys. By the way, when Delia came to us, she wasn't a great writer. And I'm not saying anything bad. She was a good writer, but she wasn't great. So there are certain things that make the difference. You just have to know what they are and then just do everything you can to become great at them. B, high concept writers are highly valued in this industry. So this is what you want to do. Even if, let's say you've written 5 scripts and none of them are high concepts. And a high concept, by the way, let's just be clear on it, is You can pitch this story in one sentence. It instantly hooks them and causes them to request the script, right? So that means you're going to something major. Let me give you an example. If you take the movie The Purge, and you may or may not have seen that. I'm not pitching it. But if you take The Purge is a horror movie that was done by Blumhouse. And here's their pitch. The pitch was, what would happen if for a 12-hour period, anyone in the US could commit any crime, including murder, and get away with it? Now let's pause. When I heard that pitch before that movie ever came out, I was talking with the producer on that one, and he says, I got a cool one for you. And then he told me that. As soon as he said it, I went, that's going to be a franchise. And he goes, yes, it is. And it was, right? And it's like, he said that the moment he said it, I was hooked. And I started seeing things. What's going to happen? What would happen if that could happen? Oh my God, then people would be able to kill anybody. That means they would go get revenge on somebody. It also would mean at some point the gangs would come out on the streets and they would just have a freebie. It's like, and that was the first one. And then the second one, the third one took it a whole nother step forward. But that was a high concept. That was an instant hook. If you have that, they know they can sell it, right? It's not about trying to, make sure that you tell how the story went, right? Because if I was telling that story, if I was going to tell the story of the first purge, I would say, here's the log line. The log line would be, and I'm just making this up, but the log line would be, the top home security salesperson comes home to find his house has been broken into by a gang who is intent on killing him and his wife and children on the night of the purge. That's the log line, right? Totally different thing. That one, I don't know if anybody says yes to that, maybe, right? But if you just pitch with the hook, the high concept, almost anybody you talk to is going to be interested in working with you. I hope you see the difference. It's a huge difference. Pitching with high concepts means if you run into somebody at Starbucks and they say they're a producer and you say, oh yeah, well, I've got this project and it's blah, and you say the high concept, they're going to want to work with you, right? If somebody just says, hey, I only got a second, or if you're making phone calls and all you can get out is one sentence, they're going to want to work with you. It makes a huge difference in your success level. C, use the ultimate bait. I've already started talking about that, but I will give you that in strategy number 6. D, option a book that's in demand. This is another way to do it. If the book's in demand, by the way. If you option a book that's not in demand, then you've just got a lot of baggage. You're working with something that can't get you into this industry. So you need something that's in demand. You need something that either has a major high concept, or has an author that has already had best-selling books or is already a bestseller. And make sure you option it. Don't write a script based on it unless you have the actual rights. E, another way you can get in the door with an easy entrance is you partner with a pro. And this could be you partnering with a producer, with an actor, or with a director. We have people who have made it on all three of those. So, you find a pro that loves how you write, that wants to work with you, and you follow their career all the way up. And again, producers, directors, actors. So now, strategy 5, really listen to this one. Don't fight uphill battles. This is the main thing that I see people doing that keeps them from succeeding for decades. Please don't do this. So here's what an uphill battle is. Period pieces, and in the feature market, period pieces are a problem because what it means is they have to double the budget of anything they're doing. And you know, it doesn't take much thinking to figure this out. If they have to have unique costuming made, if they have to have unique sets made, if they can't shoot if an airplane flies over, you know, if they have to bring in vintage cars, all of those kinds of things. Period pieces is anything 20 years in the past or 20 years in the future. So if you're doing the 1950s, that means you have every single thing they see has to be something that was created now, because what we wear now, what we see, what technology we used, even these baseball hats didn't exist back then. And I'm talking about this particular one. But so be careful. It's an uphill battle. Now, by the way, in TV series, it's a different thing. In TV series, because they're going to be using it for season after season after season, they can expense out those costs over a period of a couple of seasons, and it's okay. So you see a lot of TV series that are period pieces. So, second thing, character pieces without high concepts. Those are really difficult to sell. You may have the most incredible characters ever, but if you don't have a high concept, something they can sell in 30 seconds in a TV spot, they can't say yes. So third, multiple genres. Maximum 2 genres, by the way. And this came straight from interviews I did with distributors. I have met with a bunch of different distributors at different times. They still categorize movies based on genre. And the reason why is because, you know, first it happened at Blockbuster, where you'd walk in and say, okay, I would like a rom-com. And they would send you to the rom-com aisle. But now it's like if you look at Netflix, it has a whole list of different rows of things. And this one's the action row, and this one's the rom-com row, and this one's the, you know, sci-fi row, and that kind of thing. They still categorize it that way. Now, there are writers who think if you ask the genre and I tell you 4 genres, that means my movie is better. Just know this. If you ever say more than 2 genres, you just disqualified yourself. Distributors have told me if an indie producer brings in a movie that has 4 genres, they can't use it. They can't sell it. Now, that doesn't mean if you go to IMDb, there'll be some movies that are listed under 3 or 4 genres, but they were only sold under 2, right? Go look up The Matrix, and it was sold as a sci-fi action movie. It also has a romance in it. It also has some other things in it, but it also is a drama. But it was sold as a sci-fi action movie. So keep that in mind. 2 genres only. Don't go beyond that. And average lead characters. Really bad decision. There's a difference between having an average kind of character, as in an every man, every woman kind of character, who has something unique about them that makes them different, right? It's like, even if you look at something like Spider-Man, you know, we've got this kid that is a normal kid. He gets into things. You know, he doesn't have a girlfriend. He's having problems. He's an average character, except he got bit by a spider and he's able to, you know, use spider webs to fly across the city. And he's able to fight the bad guys. So don't just do average lead characters that are average. Make sure there's something special about them. And then this is the other mistake, this other uphill battle is studio only movies. So all of these, take a look at your projects. If you have projects that fit these, especially if it fits multiple of those, Be a little careful with those. What you are looking for, the easier deal, is you start with a high concept or an underlying property that's in need. That's something that people need in this industry. You make sure it's in a contemporary time period, so it's easier to make. You make sure it's a genre piece. This is an action story. This is a sci-fi. This is a thriller, right? Or at maximum, too, an action thriller. You make sure that the lead characters will appeal to actors, that there's something that the moment somebody even reads the character introduction, they go, oh my God, this character's amazing. I know 3 actors who would love to play this, right? That's important in this industry. And by the way, if you do all of those things, then what happens right here is you are bringing in something that it's possible for them to produce. It's something that meets their business needs, and it's something that makes it easier for you to get in the industry. You have shown you understand what producers and the industry needs. That makes a huge difference. Now, that doesn't mean that your other projects over here won't get made at some point, but if you lead with an easier deal, you have a significantly better chance, possibly as much as 5 to 10 times the chance of success. So lead with that. And then when they say, you know, what else do you have? Or, wow, you just had this movie coming out, you can start talking to people about these other projects. So create the ultimate bait. If you want to start your career, even if you've written 10 scripts, you want to start your career, go to the ultimate bait. So here's what that is. This is the easiest thing there is to get made. Low budget, high concept. We already talked about both of those. Great roles. There's the ultimate bait. Low budget, high concept, great roles. And especially if it's a high concept that has the chance of breaking out. You know, this was the ultimate bait. This is what Blumhouse used. A guy named Jason Blum. He's a small producer that very few people had ever heard of in this industry. And Jason recognized something. He said, in the horror industry, there are some high concept movies that have broken out in a huge way, like Saw, for instance. Saw was a high concept movie that cost $1 million to make, and it made back 100 million, right? Let's see, Friday the 13th cost $500,000, and it made back, like, I think it was like 45 million for the first one, but it ended up creating a franchise that made close to $1 billion, right? That was a low budget, high concept movie with great roles. So what Jason Blum did was he just started creating a whole bunch of these. And his company created The Purge and like probably 20 other horror movies that you've heard of. And he turned it into something that made him a billionaire, basically. All from the ultimate bait, low budget, high concept projects with great roles. So keep that in mind if what you want to do is to make something happen. What makes those so attractive is that they're easy to make and they have tremendous upside. So be thinking about that.